Hi everyone, and welcome to English Digest. I'm Pat.
And I'm Kat.
And today we're going to be reading about the history and a lot to do with letter cases. And I believe this was one of your ideas.
It is, yeah. I saw something about why uppercase and lowercase were named the way they were, and I thought that was really interesting. And I love historical linguistics, which is basically like history, 语言. Yeah, I really like language history. So this was a really cool thing for me to do.
Yes, it's quite interesting to read. I didn't realize it had gone... I knew there had been obviously some changes here and there over, because obviously you look at old writing, you go, I can't read this. But,
I can read it, but I don't know what in the world it says.
Right,
yeah.
and thinking back to all those, looking at these old parchments, like not far from where I grew up, there is one of the copies of the Magna Carta, and it is written in this kind of what would have been 10th or 11th century language and
10th
script.
Century English. That would be so old that I don't think we could read it anymore.
Yeah, you can't even you could probably get it translated and it says bits of it around, but it's got that very curling thing, and a lot of it's like no spaces kind of stuff.
I bet you that was written around the same time that some of these things happened in the article.
I think so. Well, without further ado then, let's read through the article and find out all about uppercase and lowercase letters.
If you were to write someone a message in all caps, they might think you were shouting. But this wasn't always the case. In fact, the Roman alphabet, which is the origin of the English alphabet, had no other letters aside from capitals. The alphabet you're reading right now has undergone remarkable transformations. Just how did it become what it is today? Roman writing was initially composed of sharp, angled letter forms. The smaller, more rounded lowercase letters date back to the invention of uncial script, which was used in 4th to 8th century Europe. Around this time, animal skin-based papers became popular as writing materials, as they were less coarse than older plant-based papers. Their surfaces allowed scribes to write with smooth, circular strokes. When Charlemagne came to power in the 9th century, he instituted Carolingian Minuscule, a more contemporary version of uncial script, as a universal standard. It was more legible than older scripts and introduced lowercase letters, spacing between words, and punctuation. This form of writing ultimately became the modern alphabet. But why are the two kinds of letters in this alphabet called uppercase and lowercase? These words come from the early days of printing presses. Type designers who used letter blocks for printing in the 1400s put their letter sets in wooden cases. The more frequently used small letters were put in the case on the lower part of the worker's desk within quick reach, and the capital letters sat in the uppercase. The next time you write your name in English or type on your phone, think of the long road these letters have taken to be in use today.
So this is all about uppercase and lowercase letters. Uppercase we also call capital letters.
Right.
And lowercase we call just small letters.
Yeah.
It's just different names for the same things, really. And
apparently you can call lowercase minuscule, too.
Okay.
But that's more formal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can see them both in our title. We have ABCs in lowercase and ABCs in uppercase. And our introduction starts by kind of what we think of capital letters, especially all caps, being used for today. It says, if you were to write someone a message in all caps, they might think you were shouting.
Right.
And this is kind of an invention, really, of social media. I guess it did probably exist in emails for a while, but...
Yeah, or book writing. I would say, like, publishing, they often use all caps for when people are speaking and they're shouting.
Yeah, or maybe to emphasize a particular word or a character's speech. You can use the kind of flowing, sideways slanted italics, but you can also use all caps. And certainly if you're on Facebook or Twitter or something and you see someone's writing in all caps, It's kind of them yelling at you rather than just writing a normal message.
Yeah,
not
it's
really,
aggressive.
Yeah, not really something you want to do.
Yeah.
And
unless you're excited.
Yes, if you're excited, then it's perfectly great to write "Yay!"
Woo!
in all caps.
Yeah.
But this is a modern usage, and we're more concerned about the history here.
So the thing is that all caps means shouting now, but this wasn't always the case. In fact, the Roman alphabet, which is the origin of the English alphabet, had no other letters aside from capitals. So yes, if you've ever gone to Italy and you take a look at a very, very old building, particularly in Rome, you might see that it has a lot of capital letters and they're all squished together. They didn't have spaces, they didn't have any lowercase, they just all look really... Yeah, it's very Latin looking, I would say. I don't know how else to put it.
And it's all very sharp and pointed as well. And I guess the fact that it goes onto stone, it'd be difficult to do a curly letter on stone, I suppose.
Yeah, it would take more time.
Yeah, whereas big, nice, sharp ones, which we'll read about in a minute, that seems to work for big stone buildings.
And one other interesting thing is that they didn't have letter U in the old Roman alphabet. They only used V.
That's right.
Yeah, so V made a U sound.
That's correct. So the alphabet you're reading now in our articles, in our magazines, this has undergone or gone through remarkable transformations. Because it's gone through more than one, so there's a plural. So a transformation is a change from one state to another state. If you think of the movie Transformers and the cartoon, it's robots turning into big trucks, army tanks, planes, and so on. That is a transformation, yes. And so the letters have undergone transformations. They've changed several times from one thing into another thing and then into another thing. And you can kind of see that relationship. They haven't changed completely like letters into numbers, so you can kind of follow it, but it is a big enough change that you will notice, it's different now than what it was before.
Yeah, exactly. So now we have the important question of this article. Just how did it become what it is today? AKA the English alphabet with spaces, lowercase letters, punctuation like periods and commas. How did we get there?
Well, we've said it starts out as the Roman alphabet, the origin of the English alphabet, and we see that Roman writing was initially composed of sharp, angled letter forms. So if we say something is composed of something, that's what it's made up of. Those are the things that are in it. They kind of complete its features. In fact, a lot of phrasal verbs like be composed of, be comprised of, be made up of, they all mean the same thing. These are phrases used to say what things are in something else, what parts are in a group.
The ingredients, you could say. Yeah. So the ingredients of Roman writing was sharp angled letter forms. We didn't have curvy things like U or I think O was rare. And there's a lot of other things that are just, if you look at the capital letters, a lot of them are very straight. So the smaller, more rounded lowercase letters date back to the invention of uncial script, which was used in 4th to 8th century Europe. So uncial script, I don't actually know what uncial means, but script is a writing that you could say it flows smoothly. So if you write in script, usually in English we're talking about writing in cursive, where all your letters are connected, they look very round, it flows out of your pen very quickly and smoothly. That's kind of what script is. Or you could just say it's a way of writing letters.
Yeah, if you think of modern day, we use computer fonts. A script would be almost like the handwritten font.
Yes.
Some people's script, like my own, is extremely messy and it's very difficult to read. If you were a very talented writer or, and that was your job, you make lovely, business cards. We'll look at some writing jobs in a moment, but your script would be basically like your handwriting when you're...
the way that you write.
Yeah, trying to do something. This was in Europe. This was kind of after the Roman Empire had... It was still around, but it wasn't quite as big and wasn't...
In Western Europe, I think it was gone already.
I think you're probably right, yes. And so all of these countries, which had been previously using Roman capital, big, spiky letters, had started to go, well, we maybe go back to our old systems or move to something different. And kind of changes are starting to happen.
Well, it's about what kind of was invented or developed around that time. Yeah. So what it says is, around this time, animal skin-based papers became popular as writing materials, as they were less coarse than older plant-based papers. So let me first talk about this word coarse, and then we can talk about what kind of papers we're talking about. So coarse is kind of a word for rough. You could say that rough applies to anything that is not smooth. Coarse is like anything that you can feel between your fingers that is not smooth. So if you have coarse fabric, you might feel it and you feel it's kind of scratchy, like wool sweaters or something like that. A coarse paper would be a paper with a lot of bumps, a lot of small lines and things like that. It would not be smooth. It would not feel, very flat. It would feel kind of rough.
Exactly. Yeah. And the skin or the paper made out of plants, so that's plant-based papers, was a lot rougher.
Yeah.
Because they'd take the plant, they'd kind of mash it down with water and then flatten it out and dry it, and you'd have this kind of old paper.
Yeah.
So they go, well, why don't we try using animal skins? So, different animals, leather often as part of it.
It was vellum and parchment.
Right.
So it was sheepskin and goatskin specifically. Yeah, so that was the development over papyrus, which was the plant-based paper.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot smoother, and so therefore it was easier to write curved letters on. Imagine if you had a bumpy piece of paper you're trying to write neatly, then if you're trying to do circles, oh, it's gone. Oh, I've gone over a bump. But if you're doing a big, strong, spiky letter, it's a lot easier on that kind of paper.
Exactly.
So, maybe they wanted to do curved letters, they just found it too difficult. But these new animal skin-based papers, they can make their writing look more beautiful, more flowing. As we see in the article, their surfaces, that is the surfaces of these skin-based papers, allowed scribes to write with smooth, circular strokes. So a scribe was basically one of the people who could read and write. There weren't many back in those times.
They really weren't.
Yeah, they were mostly either members of the church or at least trained by the church.
Yeah, and I think they were mostly writing copies of the Bible, which would be illustrated, because that was the most important document of the time.
Right. They would write up other official things. If a king gave an order, the scribes would write it and copy it and send it out to people who could read so that they knew what was going on. But their job was basically to write down words and copy these words as many times as neatly as possible.
Yep. Because we didn't have printers yet.
Exactly.
Everything had to be written by hand.
Yes, it was a professional writer, but they didn't really write their own stuff. They just copied other things and took down what the king just said and sent that out. And they could write differently on these new pieces of paper.
Yeah, exactly. They could write with circular strokes. As you can imagine by the sound of it, circular means like a circle. So whereas Roman letters would be made of straight lines, like A has 3 straight lines, a circle would be something like lowercase e or lowercase u. They're very curvy looking. So circular means it's like a circle. It doesn't have to be an exact circle, but it can be mostly circular, mostly like a circle.
Yes, no real straight lines, lots of loops and curls and so on. And of course they are strokes. And here we mean a stroke as in one single movement of your pen or possibly your brush across the paper or whatever you're using as your material.
Right.
And that could be quite a long one with a curl, or it could go in a couple of directions, but as soon as your pen or your brush leaves the paper, that stroke is done.
Yeah.
Of course, most of you guys will have learned the proper way to do Chinese characters.
The counting strokes,
Exactly. So the strokes are what we use. How many strokes does this character have? Some of them like E. That's nice and easy. 1 stroke.
Ha.
Some of the more difficult ones, I'm told turtle has got like...
Oh, yeah, gui.
Yeah, more strokes than anything else because you have to make
big.
so many little marks on the paper.
But the nice thing is it actually looks like a turtle, so it's easy to remember.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. So that's what we mean by strokes, the movements of pens and brushes. And of course, if you want to do circular ones, then you need a nice smooth surface, which is why people who do calligraphy will want very high quality paper to do it on.
Exactly. You're not going to do calligraphy on printing paper most of the time. It just doesn't work the same way.
Okay, now we're going to take a short break here. When we come back, we'll learn a little bit more about the next stage of the transformation or evolution from Roman alphabet to the English alphabet. But right now, let's take a short break.
are back with our article on ABCs lowercase and ABCs uppercase. So we've talked so far about how the English alphabet originated with just capitals, which are very sharp, and then the development of some new writing materials created the opportunity for circular strokes, like uncial script. Very rounded looking and very cool looking if you've ever seen it on a manuscript or something. So now we're talking about a new stage in this, and it has to do with the transfer of power. So somebody new rises to power in Europe, and we're talking about Charlemagne. When Charlemagne came to power in the 9th century, he instituted Carolingian Minuscule, a more contemporary version of uncial script as a universal standard. So Charlemagne is this very famous ruler who I believe was instituted by the Pope as the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire.
Yes, he was the first one. He kind of came out of sort of a bit from Central Europe, conquered most of what is now France.
Yeah.
And then
Germany?
Lots of Germany where he was fighting. He was a Christian king, and so the people in Rome made him the Holy Roman Empire and gave him a lot of power.
Yeah.
And he made all kinds of reforms to currency, to laws, to all kinds of things.
Yeah, he was a big deal.
Yeah, he kind of pulled Western Europe out of the kind of Rome has fallen, we've got no empire anymore, to, all right, things are a little more safe and a little less kind of messy and chaotic, and kind of pulled Europe away out of those dark ages towards the more modern times.
Yeah, I mean, the church was still a significant power, which is why they were able to make him into an emperor. But he definitely did a lot for Europe during that time. So he came to power in the 9th century. This is after uncial script has been used for about 4 or 5 centuries. He instituted Carolingian Minuscule. So the Carolingian Empire, I think, is what his emperor was called?
Yes. Charlemagne basically means Charles the Great, if you translate
Carol.
it. Yeah, and Carol is the more German or form of it. So Carolingian basically means of Charlemagne's time and that of his descendants. The Carolingian dynasty of France, which went on for a while before the next dynasty came along. So that was why his name gets attached to this form of writing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he instituted this. If you institute something, basically you start it. You make it a law or you make it a rule, and you make it so that everybody kind of follows it, not just in your time, but in the future. A government would institute new laws. They would put them on the law books and say, this is now a law. Everybody's voted. It's agreed. And if you look it up, you can find it in our law books with all the different, this is what happens if you break the law. This is how we apply the law, and so on.
Yeah, like how last year during the pandemic, a lot of rules were instituted about wearing masks and what you could do and not do in public.
Yeah, and people coming into Taiwan. So we had to institute all those rules to keep people here safe. And Charlemagne instituted this new type of writing, Carolingian Minuscule.
So Carolingian Minuscule, if you look at it, it looks like uncial, but is more separated.
Okay.
I think it's less like a bunch of round strokes that just look like a bunch of M's or N's, and it looks more like modern English letters. You can almost read it, easily.
Okay.
Almost.
Yeah, I believe we will have pictures of some of this in our magazine, but we're recording this before the artwork is done, so I haven't actually had a chance to have a look just yet, but hopefully you'll see them in our magazine.
Yes.
But what it was contemporary.
So contemporary can mean modern, but in this case it means more like of that time. So con means with, and tempo, of course, means time. So it's with that time. So it means that for the time that Charlemagne was doing this, Carolingian Minuscule was the version of script that was the most modern at that time.
Yeah, the cutting edge of that time.
Yeah, so you could say something is contemporary to somebody. That means that that's when it happened. Yeah.
So it was a more modern form of writing, and he made it a universal standard. If something is universal, then it's either known or used pretty much everywhere. If for those scientists of you out there, you've probably seen the periodic table with all those letter combinations, AU for gold and all the rest of it, C for carbon. That's a universal standard for chemical elements.
Yes.
Everybody uses it. Everybody follows it. Pretty much all around the world, we have a universal 24-hour clock. We all follow that. We pretty much all follow the 7-day week.
Yeah.
Those are universal things.
Very true.
Some things aren't universal. Every country pretty much has its own money. If you think about power outlets, you've got different plugs in different countries and different parts of the world. They're not universal. But basically, Charlemagne said, here is our new writing, and this is what anybody who is kind of ruled by me, and that was quite a big area, should follow. And of course, once you see the big, strong power doing it, all the others are like, let's do that too. It sounds like a good idea.
So if your language could be written in alphabet at that time, it would probably be written in this script. Yeah. And why did they want to do this? Well, the article explains it was more legible than older scripts and introduced lowercase letters, spacing between words, and punctuation. All things we love in English today. So if something is legible, that is a way of saying that it's possible to read or easy to read. So is your handwriting very legible, Pat?
Only if I try extremely hard.
I think my cursive is legible. My print is okay.
My father is a doctor. They are well known for not having legible handwriting.
Very illegible.
Yeah, so you look at his signature, you've got no idea what his actual name is. It's just a few curls and a fly that's been squashed on the paper.
Yeah, sounds about right.
But this Carolingian Minuscule was more legible. It was easier for people to read.
Yeah.
So they could learn to read with it, which was quite important as time went on.
Yeah, because he wanted people to learn how to read.
Yeah.
Fun fact, Charlemagne couldn't read.
There we go.
He wanted to read, but he couldn't read.
It was just too hard.
Yep.
So he also introduced these lowercase letters. Maybe that helps with the reading. Spacing between words, which would 100% help if you know where one stops and one begins.
Oh.
And punctuation. So punctuation is things like periods, commas, quote marks, colons, semicolons, and all of those apostrophes.
All the marks you see that are not letters in writing.
Yeah, that basically stand for ends of sentences, breaks in sentences, letters that happen to be missing. They indicate possessives.
Imagine trying to read English with no punctuation today. That would be a nightmare.
It would be terrible.
Ugh.
So we've got a lot to thank Charlemagne for in terms of turning writing into something we can read. And this form of writing ultimately became the modern alphabet.
Hurrah!
So ultimately means in the end. So yes, there were changes along the way. There were probably a few more kind of transformations as different letters kind of take on slightly different shapes over time. But in the end, today, ultimately, when kind of all this time has passed, this is the modern English alphabet.
That's right. So it was kind of the first script to have both uppercase and lowercase letters. And now we're going to talk about why they are called that and not just capital and small or capital and minuscule. So the next paragraph says, but why are the two kinds of letters in this alphabet called uppercase and lowercase? It's a very good question. And I'd say it's a lot easier to answer than the whole rest of this.
Yes. It's actually a very kind of very...
obvious.
Yeah. I don't want to say boring, but it's kind of like it's a very logical, sensible, normal thing that you'd expect anybody to come up with if you were in their position.
Totally.
But these words come from the early days of printing presses.
Hooray for the printing press.
Yes. These printing presses were basically mechanical devices where you would arrange all the letters that you would need in a line and then press them down onto some form of paper or even wood. And then they would leave an impression, and there you go. You had a book.
Yeah. So I think this was when more people started learning how to read because more people could have books.
Yes, they made books a lot cheaper because you didn't need to pay these expert scribes to do them. You just had to just print them out. It was very quick, very simple, very easy to read. So we're looking at people like Gutenberg and Caxton, William Caxton, one of the first ones in the UK. So, but yeah, the people who designed these big machines for printing books.
All right. Well, who were they and what did they do? It says type designers who used letter blocks for printing in the 1400s, when it was invented, put their letter sets in wooden cases. Of course, you want to organize the things that you're using to print, especially if you're trying to arrange an entire sentence, an entire paragraph, and do it quickly. You'd really want to have it so that you can grab things quickly.
Yeah, so basically like 26 different parts in this kind of case going all across for my little letters.
Probably more because you want multiples of each letter.
Oh, yeah. I imagine they had like, a whole bunch in each like little box.
5 E's, 4 A's, and, maybe 2 X's.
Couple of Q's. Yeah. You don't need so many of those. So the more frequently used smaller letters or small letters were put in the case on the lower part of the worker's desk within quick reach. Of course, they use them more often. They want to make them easier to grab. And the capital letters sat in the uppercase because you don't need them as often. You only need them for like names, the first letters of names, first letters of sentences.
First letters of nouns if you're using German.
Yes, so, well, there's maybe a few more then. But anyway, you'd still need more lowercase letters. So they were easier to grab, just like you. You have your books that you want to read more often, closer, and your stuff that you don't use as often on a higher shelf.
Exactly.
So, just simple kind of, basic design of a work area.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all we have to learn about that. And I think it's a really interesting journey that the letters have taken. So the article finishes off by saying, the next time you write your name in English or type on your phone, think of the long road these letters have taken to be in use today.
Yeah, letters do get quite interesting. Even just last week, a group of the teachers here or the writers here were in a room and we were all writing different letters of different countries' languages on a whiteboard just for a bit of fun and a discussion about how do we do cursive, who's got good handwriting, what about Korean and Thai.
Is it bad to make a T with no curve at the bottom?
Yeah, all things like that. So it's an interesting topic that will still kind of come up, especially among, groups of people who have a lot to do with words, letters, writing, and so on. So that is all we've got time for today. Thanks very much for listening to us both for English Digest. I'm Pat.
And I'm Kat.
We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.